The Oklahoma sun didn't just burn, it judged. It judged the cracked earth and the brittle grass. And it judged 7-year-old Lily Carter, a girl so small the bucket she carried seemed to have a will of its own, a will to pull her straight down into the dirt. 3 weeks. For 3 weeks this walk to the well had been hers, and hers alone. 3 weeks since Papa went to town for medicine. 3 weeks since Mama's forehead started feeling like a hot stove. He'd be back, he promised. But promises were just words. And out here in the territory, words dried up and blew away just like everything else. Mrs. Hutchkins from the next homestead over, her words didn't blow away. They stuck like burrs. Whispers about men who leave and never come back. Lily hated those whispers. She reached the well, its stone circle a mouth gaping at the sky. Papa said it was the most valuable thing they owned. Water was life. Without it, everything died. Lately, dying was all Lily could think about. Mama wasn't getting better. She was drifting away, talking to ghosts in the corners of their small cabin, calling out names Lily had never heard. The rope bit into Lily's palms as she lowered the bucket into the dark. She listened for the splash, a lonely sound in the vast silence. She counted to 10, just like Papa taught her, her voice a tiny thread in the wind. Then came the hard part, the pulling. Her arms were twigs, the bucket was a boulder. The rope slipped, burning her skin. She started over, slipped again. Tears welled up, hot and angry. She couldn't cry. Crying was for babies. Mama needed her to be big. She braced her worn-out boots against the stone, pulling with all her might, when a shadow fell over her. A shadow so big it swallowed her whole. Her heart didn't just jump, it tried to claw its way out of her chest. She spun around, the rope falling from her hands, the bucket plunging back into the darkness with a sickening splash. A man stood there. He was tall as a cottonwood tree, with a hat that hid his eyes and a revolver strapped to his hip. He was everything Mama had warned her about. A stranger. The kind of man who preyed on homesteads where the men were gone. And for a moment, Lily forgot how to breathe. "Easy now, little one," the man said. His voice wasn't mean. It was quiet, gentle even. He held up his hands, palms open, like he was calming a horse. "Didn't mean to give you a fright." He took 1 step forward. Lily took 2 steps back. Her eyes were locked on the gun. "You all alone out here?" he asked. The lie was right there on her tongue. "Papa's just over the rise. He'll be back any second." But the words wouldn't come out. Something in the man's face stopped her. When he tilted his head, the sun finally caught his eyes. They weren't cruel eyes. They were sad. The kind of sad that had seen too much. He crouched down, making himself smaller. "My name's Colt," he said. "I've been camped a ways east of here. Seen you come to this well every morning for 3 days now. Seen you struggle with that bucket." He paused. "That's a heavy burden for someone so small." "I'm 7, she whispered, the words scratching her throat. "And I'm not small. I'm big enough." "I can see that," he said, and he sounded like he meant it. "But I gotta ask again. Where are your folks? It ain't safe for a child out here alone." She shouldn't say a word. She should run. But he'd been watching for 3 days. He already knew. He knew she was alone. And Mama? Mama was getting worse. Yesterday, she'd called Lily by another woman's name. "Mama's sick," Lily said, the truth spilling out like water from a cracked cup. "Real sick." Colt's sad eyes sharpened. "And your papa?" "He went to town, for medicine." "When did he leave?" The question was quiet, but it had an edge to it now. Lily looked down at the dust on her shoes. "A while ago." "How long is a while, sweetheart?" She counted the days in her head. So many days. 3 weeks, she said. Maybe more. Colt sucked in a breath, a sharp, worried sound. When she looked up, his jaw was clenched tight. His eyes weren't sad anymore. They were hard. 3 weeks, he repeated, his voice flat. "And your mama's been sick this whole time?" Lily nodded. The story tumbled out now, about the fever getting worse, about Mama not making sense, about the cupboards getting empty. "I don't know what to do," she finished, her voice breaking. I keep waiting for Papa, but he's not coming back, and I'm scared." The last word was a ghost, and just like that, Colt was moving. He stood, grabbed the rope, and hauled the bucket up from the well like it was a child's toy. "You're going to take me to your mama," he said. It wasn't a question. "But I don't know you," she protested, even as he picked up the full bucket with one hand. "That's true," he said, turning to face her. "But I know you need help, and I'm not the kind of man who walks away." He started walking toward the path. "Show me the way, little one." For a heartbeat, Lily froze. Mama's warnings screamed in her head, but the image of Mama, pale and still in her bed, screamed louder. She turned and led the stranger home. The cabin looked worse through his eyes. The porch sagged. The door hung crooked. Weeds choked the life out of Mama's old flower beds. Papa had always kept things nice, but Lily couldn't do everything. Colt pushed open the door and stopped dead. Lily saw his face change. Concern turned to shock. Shock turned to horror. The single room was a disaster. Cold. Dark. And in the corner, on the small bed, Mama lay so still she barely looked alive. He crossed the room in 3 strides, laying a hand on Mama's forehead. "Jesus," he breathed. "She's on fire." He turned back to Lily, his expression grim. "Sweetheart, I need you to tell me about your papa. What's his name? What does he look like?" "Thomas Carter," Lily said. "He's tall. Brown hair. A beard. He wears a gray hat with a hole in the brim." Colt went completely still. The silence that followed was worse than any noise. It was a heavy, terrible thing that pressed down on Lily's chest, making it hard to breathe. "Little one," he said, his voice so careful it scared her. "I need to tell you something about your papa." He knelt down in front of her, and she knew. She just knew that whatever he was about to say was going to break the world in two. "3 weeks ago," Colt began, his voice barely a whisper. "There was trouble in town. A card game went bad at the saloon. A man was killed." He paused, and his jaw worked like the next words were stones in his throat. "The man who died. They didn't know his name, but he had brown hair. A beard." Colt's eyes locked on hers. "And he was wearing a gray hat with a hole in the brim." Lily stared. The words didn't make sense. They were just sounds. "No," she said. "That wasn't him. That was somebody else. Papa's coming back. He promised." "I know he did, sweetheart." Colt's voice was thick with a hurt that wasn't his own. "I'm sure he meant to." But the truth was a slow poison, seeping in. 3 weeks was too long. Papa wouldn't leave them. Not with Mama so sick. He wouldn't leave her alone. Unless he couldn't come back. Unless he was never, ever coming back. The sob that ripped out of her was a sound she'd been holding in for 21 days. Colt pulled her into his arms, and she cried against his dusty shirt, crying for the papa who was gone, for the mama who was dying, for the little girl who was all alone in a world that had suddenly gone dark. "I've got you," he murmured, his big hand cradling her head. "You're not alone anymore." When she could finally breathe again, she pulled back. "Mama doesn't know," she whispered. "She keeps asking for him." "We'll tell her," Colt said, his face set like stone. "But first, we have to save her. She needs a doctor. Right now." He stood, his eyes scanning the barren cabin. "When's the last time you ate a real meal?" The cupboards were empty. The root cellar was bare. Colt's face was grim. "All right. I'm riding to town. I'm bringing back the doctor, food, medicine, everything. I need you to be brave just a little longer." "How long?" she asked, the fear creeping back. "Everyone who left?" He knelt again, eye to eye. "I will be back before dark. That is a promise. And I do not break my promises." He handed her his canteen. "Try to get your mama to drink some of this." He set down a bundle of jerky. "And you eat. You hear me?" He was almost out the door when he turned back. "Lily, no matter what happens, no matter what anyone says, I am coming back for you. You believe me?" "Why?" The word burst out of her. "Why do you care?" A shadow passed over his face, a deep and ancient pain. "I had a little girl once," he said, his voice rough. "She'd be your age now." He swallowed hard. "When I saw you trying so hard, all by yourself, it reminded me there's still good in this world worth fighting for." Then he was gone. Lily watched from the window as he galloped away, a lone rider against a blood-red sky, and for the first time in weeks, she felt a tiny flicker of something that wasn't fear, it was hope. And in the territory, hope was the most dangerous thing of all. The hours dragged on like wounded animals. The sun bled across the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and purple. Lily tried to give her mama water, but her mother just mumbled about forgotten chores and turned her head away. Then she heard it. The sound of hoofbeats. More than one. She ran to the door, her heart hammering. What if it wasn't Colt? What if it was someone else? Bad men. But it was him. And beside him rode an older man with a black bag, the doctor. Colt practically threw himself from the horse. "Doc Mason's here," he said, his voice urgent. "He's going to help your mama." The doctor brushed past her and went straight to the bed. He checked Mama's eyes, listened to her breathing, his face growing more and more serious. Finally, he turned to Colt. "Typhoid fever," he said, his voice grave. "Advanced stage. Frankly, son, I don't know if she'll make it through the night." "You have to try," Colt said, his voice tight. "It's going to take a miracle," the doctor said, pulling bottles from his bag. "She'll need constant watch. Someone has to keep the fever down." "I'll stay," Colt said without a second's hesitation. "Whatever it costs, I'll pay it." The doctor gave him a long, searching look. "You're the husband?" "No," Colt said. "Just a man who keeps his promises." The next 3 days were a blur of hell. Colt never left. He and Lily took turns wiping Mama's brow with cool cloths, forcing drops of water and medicine between her cracked lips. Colt talked to her, told her stories of his life, his voice a low, steady rumble in the quiet cabin. On the second night, her fever spiked. The doctor had said if it got any higher, it would be over. Lily, pretending to sleep on her small bedroll, watched Colt sit by the bed. And then he did something she never expected. He began to pray. His voice was rough, unpracticed. "I couldn't save my wife," he whispered to the shadows. "I couldn't save my daughter. I've carried that failure for 5 long years. Please, don't let me fail this little girl too. She's already lost so much." Tears slipped down Lily's cheeks in the dark. This stranger, this sad-eyed man, had become the only wall between her and the end of the world. Then, slowly, a miracle began to happen. The fever started to break. On the morning of the 4th day, Mama's breathing eased. The doctor came, examined her, and let out a long, slow breath. "She's turned the corner," he said, a weary smile on his face. "She's going to make it." Colt sagged against the wall, the relief so great it seemed to drain all the strength from him. Lily threw her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shirt. "Thank you," she sobbed. "Thank you." "You don't need to thank me, little one," he said, his voice thick. Later that day, Mama's eyes opened. They were clear, focused. Her gaze found Lily, then moved to the strange man sitting in her husband's chair. "Lily?" she whispered, her voice a dry rasp. Who is that?" Lily explained everything, the fever, the doctor, how Colt had saved them. When she finished, Sarah Carter looked at Colt, her eyes wide with disbelief. "Now we have to tell her the rest," Colt said softly. He moved to the bed and gently took Sarah's hand. He told her about Thomas, about the fight in town, about the unmarked grave. Sarah closed her eyes, and silent tears traced paths through the dust on her cheeks. Lily climbed onto the bed and they held each other, 2 survivors in a sea of grief. When the tears finally stopped, Sarah asked the question that had been hanging in the air. "Why?" she whispered, looking at Colt. "Why would you do all this for strangers?" Colt stood in the doorway, framed by the setting sun. "Because I saw your daughter trying to carry a burden that was too heavy for her," he said. And I realized that maybe I couldn't save my family, but I could save yours. I can't pay you, Sarah said, her voice breaking. I'm not asking for payment, Colt replied. Just for you both to get strong again. He cleared his throat. I'll help out till you're on your feet. Chop wood, hunt. I can sleep in the barn. After that, I'll move on. Move on where? Lily cried, a new panic seizing her. She'd just lost one papa. She couldn't lose another. Colt's smile was sad. Wherever the road takes me, I suppose. I'm a drifter, little one. It's what I do. But Lily saw something in his eyes that told a different story. A story about a man who was tired of running. A man who was looking for a place to stop. And as she looked from her recovering mama to the sad-eyed cowboy who had saved them, a fierce wish took root in her 7-year-old heart. She wished he would stay. She didn't know that some wishes, when they come true, bring a whole new kind of trouble with them. In the weeks that followed, Colt became a fixture. He worked from sunup to sundown, fixing the broken porch, mending fences, bringing them fresh meat and supplies from town. He was always respectful, always kept his distance, leaving every evening to sleep in the barn. Sarah grew stronger. Lily thrived. The quiet, haunted little girl disappeared, replaced by one who laughed and chattered, following Colt everywhere, absorbing his lessons on how to track a deer or whittle a bird from a block of wood. Sarah watched them, her heart a tangle of gratitude and something else, something warm and dangerous she refused to name. Then, one afternoon, Mrs. Hutchkins came calling. Her smile was as sweet as poison honey. Sarah, dear, she began, fanning herself on the newly repaired porch. People are talking. Sarah's blood ran cold. An unmarried man, spending all his time here, living in your barn, with a young widow and her impressionable child. Mrs. Hutchkins leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial hiss. It's not proper. The church ladies are worried. They're talking about asking the marshal to investigate the situation. She paused for effect. You know what they do with children from homes they deem unsuitable. The unspoken threat hung in the air. They could take Lily. They could take her daughter away, just because of gossip, just because a good man had shown them kindness. That evening, when Colt saw Sarah's pale, stricken face, he knew something was wrong. She told him everything, her voice trembling. Maybe you should go, she finished, the words tasting like ash. For Lily's sake. No, Colt said, his voice firm. I'm not leaving you to face this alone. He took off his hat, running a hand through his hair. But she's right about one thing. The gossip isn't going to stop, it's going to get worse. He took a deep breath. Sarah, there's only one way to make it stop. One way to protect you and Lily for good. She stared at him, confused. Marry me. The world stopped spinning. What? In name only, he added quickly. Just a piece of paper. I'll lease the abandoned ranch next door. We'll live separately. But the marriage, it would make it legal. It would give me the right to be here, to protect you both, without anyone having the right to say a word. He was offering to tie himself to them, to a widow and her child, just to save them from rumors. For you, he said, his eyes finding hers. For Lily. For what's right. Lily appeared in the doorway then, her small face anxious. Mama, please, she whispered. Mr. Colt is good. He won't leave us. Sarah looked at her daughter's pleading face, at Colt's steady, honorable gaze. She had no choice. It was this, or risk losing everything. All right, she whispered. The ceremony was a cold, businesslike affair in the justice of the peace's dusty office. A few scribbled words, 2 signatures on a piece of paper, and it was done. Sarah Carter was now Sarah Dawson. There was no kiss, no celebration. Colt moved onto the neighboring property, just as he'd promised. Close enough to help, far enough to be proper. The gossip quieted to a low hum. Days fell into a comfortable, yet strange, routine. He'd join them for supper, then sit on the porch teaching Lily about the stars while Sarah washed dishes, pretending not to watch the man who was her husband but wasn't. She told herself it was just gratitude. But then she'd catch his eye and see a flicker of something that made her forget to breathe. One evening, Lily was showing Colt a drawing she'd made. "I'm going to call you Papa Colt now," she announced, matter-of-factly. The silence was absolute. Colt's face went pale, then flushed a deep red. He looked at Sarah, a question in his tear-filled eyes. She could only nod. "All right, baby girl," he choked out, his voice thick with emotion. "Papa Colt it is." That night, Sarah lay awake, the wall she'd built around her heart beginning to crumble. This was just an arrangement, but her heart didn't seem to understand that. 2 months passed. The arrangement was working. But beneath the surface, everything was changing. Sarah was falling in love with her husband. She was sure he felt nothing but a sense of duty, a promise to a little girl at a well. Then a rider appeared on the horizon. He was tall and hard-faced, with eyes as cold as a snake's. He rode straight up to the porch and dismounted, his gaze sweeping over the homestead with a proprietary air. "Well now," the stranger drawled, a cruel smile twisting his lips. "If it ain't my dear sister-in-law, Sarah." Sarah froze. She knew that voice. "Vernon," she breathed. Vernon Carter. Her dead husband's younger brother, a man so cruel and greedy that Thomas had fled from him years ago. "Heard about my brother's accident," Vernon said, his smile widening. "Came to pay my respects, and to collect what's mine." "There is nothing here for you," Sarah said, her voice shaking. Vernon's eyes slid past her, landing on Lily, who had frozen in the doorway. "Oh, I think there is," he said softly. "See, now that Thomas is gone, the law says I'm her next of kin, her legal guardian." "She has a father," Colt said, stepping out onto the porch to stand beside Sarah. Vernon laughed, a short, ugly sound. "You? The convenient husband? Don't make me laugh. This sham marriage won't stand up in court, and when the judge hands her over to me, I'll be taking this land too." His eyes glittered with malice. "We'll be heading to St. Louis soon, Lily girl. Time to make a proper lady out of you." "Over my dead body," Sarah whispered. "That," Vernon said with a pleasant smile, "can be arranged." He tipped his hat and rode away, leaving ruin in his wake. Lily was sobbing. Sarah was shaking uncontrollably. "He won't take her," Colt said, his face carved from granite. "I promise you, Sarah. He will not take her." But for the first time since she'd met him, Sarah heard a tremor of doubt in his voice. Because they all knew Vernon was right. The marriage was a lie, and the law was on his side. Vernon came back the next morning, a smirking lawyer at his side. They served Sarah with official papers, a court date, a petition for guardianship based on blood right and a fraudulent marriage. "The judge will see right through this," the lawyer sneered. "You don't even live under the same roof. It's a pathetic little sham." After they left, the silence in the cabin was suffocating. Lily had cried herself to sleep. Sarah stood staring out the window, watching her world fall apart all over again. "I can't lose her, Colt," she whispered. "She's all I have left." "You won't," he said from behind her. "How can you be so sure?" she cried, turning on him. "He's right. This marriage isn't real. We lied." "Then we make it real." She stared at him. He stood in the doorway, his hat in his hands, looking more uncertain than she had ever seen him. "Sarah," he started, his voice rough. "This stopped being just an arrangement for me a long time ago." Her heart stopped. "I wake up thinking about you, about Lily," he said, taking a step closer. "Coming here. It's the only thing that makes sense anymore. You've given me back a reason to live. You've given me a family." His voice dropped to a whisper. "You've given me a home." He was so close now she could see the flecks of gray in his stubble, the raw hope warring with fear in his eyes. "I love you, Sarah. I love you. And I love that little girl like she was my own. If you'll have me, truly have me, I'll spend the rest of my days proving it." Tears she hadn't realized she was holding back streamed down her face. I thought I was just a promise you had to keep." "You're not a promise," he said, his thumb gently wiping a tear from her cheek. "You're everything." She didn't answer with words. She surged forward and kissed him, a kiss filled with months of unspoken longing, of fear and gratitude, and a love she thought she'd never feel again. When they broke apart, a small voice came from the loft ladder. "Does this mean Papa Colt is staying forever?" Lily stood there, her face streaked with tears, but her eyes shining with a desperate hope. Colt knelt and opened his arms. "Forever, baby girl," he said, as she flew into them. "I promise." That night, Colt moved his things into the cabin, not for appearances, but because it was his home now. They were a family. But their newfound happiness was fragile, and Vernon Carter was coming to smash it to pieces. The next morning, Vernon returned, and this time, he brought the law. Marshall Tucker was a tall, weary-looking man who clearly didn't enjoy his work. "Ma'am, Mr. Dawson," he said, his eyes avoiding theirs. "Mr. Carter here has made some serious allegations. Marriage fraud, coercion. I have to investigate." "Investigate what?" Sarah cried. "This man saved our lives." "Or he saw an opportunity," Vernon sneered. "A vulnerable widow, a helpless child. It's a classic predator's move, Marshall." "That's a lie!" Lily screamed, running to hide behind Colt's legs. "See?" Vernon said smoothly. "The child is attached to her captor. It's tragic, really." The marshal sighed. "I need to speak with the girl. Alone." Sarah's blood ran cold. Everything depended on what a 7-year-old girl, terrified and under pressure, would say. Colt knelt in front of Lily. "Just tell the truth, sweetheart," he said, his voice steady and calm. "Whatever you feel in your heart, just tell him the truth." Lily nodded, her small face set with a grim determination. The marshal led her outside, away from the porch, away from the listening ears. Sarah gripped Colt's hand, her knuckles white. Vernon watched them, a triumphant smirk on his face. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, the marshal walked back to the porch, Lily holding tightly to his hand. His expression was impossible to read. "Well?" Vernon demanded impatiently. "What did she say?" The marshal looked from Vernon to Colt and Sarah, his gaze lingering. Then he cleared his throat. "The child told me everything," he said. Sarah felt her knees buckle. "She told me about her real father," the marshal continued, his voice cold and hard. "How he'd disappear for days. How he left them with no food. How he abandoned them for 3 weeks while her mother lay dying." "That's not relevant," Vernon sputtered. "It is entirely relevant," the marshal snapped, "because she then told me how Mr. Dawson found her. How he paid for the doctor out of his own pocket. How he has been kind and patient, and has made her feel safe for the first time in her life." The marshal's gaze fell on Vernon like a physical blow. "She said, and I quote, 'Papa Colt is my real papa, because he's the one who stayed.'" A choked sob escaped Sarah's lips. Colt's arm tightened around her. "The girl's been brainwashed," Vernon roared. "The girl," the marshal said, his voice dropping dangerously low, "is telling the truth. I've also been asking around town about you, Mr. Carter. Seems you have gambling debts in 3 territories and a warrant for assault back in Missouri. You are not a fit guardian for a dog, let alone this child." Vernon's face turned a mottled purple. "I am her blood. I have rights. And Mr. Dawson has a legal marriage certificate, a stable home, and the unconditional love of that child," the marshal countered. "The judge will see it that way. I'll make sure of it." He rested his hand on the butt of his pistol. "Now, I suggest you get on your horse and ride out of my jurisdiction. And if you ever come near this family again, I will personally lock you up and throw away the key." Vernon stared, his face a mask of impotent fury. He pointed a trembling finger at Colt. "This ain't over, Drifter." Colt took a step forward, his gentle eyes now chips of ice. "Oh, it's over, Vernon," he said, his voice a low growl. "You come near my wife or my daughter again, and you won't have to worry about the marshal. You'll answer to me." Something in Colt's face made Vernon take a step back. He was a bully, and he had just met a man who would not be bullied. With a final curse, Vernon mounted his horse and galloped away, a pathetic cloud of dust in his wake. The moment he was gone, Lily burst into tears and launched herself into Colt's arms. "You stayed," she cried. "You really stayed." "Never leaving, baby girl," Colt murmured into her hair, holding her tight. "Never again." Sarah wrapped her arms around them both, her family, whole and safe at last. Marshall Tucker tipped his hat. "You've got a good man there, Mrs. Dawson," he said, "and one brave little girl." The story of what happened spread through the small community like wildfire. The whispers of gossip were replaced by murmurs of respect. That afternoon, Mrs. Hutchkins appeared on their porch, a freshly baked pie in her hands and a look of genuine shame on her face. "I was wrong," she said simply. "I let my foolish tongue get the better of me. You've built something good here." One by one, the neighbors came, bringing gifts of food, offering help, welcoming Colt into their community. The cloud of suspicion had lifted, replaced by the warm sun of acceptance. That Sunday, they had a second wedding. This time, it wasn't in a dusty office. It was in the town church, filled with all their new friends. Lily, wearing her best dress, walked down the aisle first, scattering wildflower petals. Sarah followed, her eyes only for the man waiting for her at the altar. When the pastor asked Colt if he took this woman to be his wife, his voice boomed through the church, clear and certain. "I do, with all my heart." And when it was Sarah's turn, she said, "I do," and meant it with every broken, healed piece of her soul. This time they kissed, and the whole town cheered. Autumn arrived, painting the landscape in hues of gold and crimson. The two ranches were now one, the fences between them torn down. Colt had added 2 new rooms to the cabin. One afternoon, Sarah stood at the well, the very spot where her new life had begun. One hand rested on her swollen belly. She was 6 months pregnant. "Mama!" Lily called, running across the yard. "Papa Colt is teaching me how to mend the roof." Sarah watched her daughter, so confident and fearless, scramble up the ladder to where Colt was working. He greeted her with a smile that lit up his whole face. He appeared behind Sarah a moment later, his arms wrapping around her waist, his hands coming to rest on their unborn child. "What are you thinking about?" he asked softly. "Everything," she whispered, leaning back against his solid strength. "How a year ago, I was standing right here, thinking my world had ended. And now it's just beginning," he finished for her. He kissed her temple. "Have I told you today that I love you, Mrs. Dawson?" "Only about 5 times," she teased. "You're getting predictable." He grinned, turning her to face him. "Then let me find a new way to say it." Snow fell on Christmas morning, blanketing the world in a pristine, quiet white. Inside the warm cabin, a fire crackled in the hearth. Thomas Dawson, Jr., born healthy and strong 2 months earlier, slept peacefully in a cradle Colt had carved himself. Lily sat beside him, gently rocking the cradle, a protective and proud older sister. As they gathered around the table for breakfast, Lily grew quiet. "Papa Colt," she said thoughtfully, "do you remember the first day? At the well?" Colt's eyes met Sarah's across the table. "I remember it like it was yesterday, baby girl." "I was so scared," Lily said, her 8-year-old face serious. "I prayed for someone to help us. And then you came. You were the answer to my prayer." Colt knelt beside her chair, his own eyes suspiciously bright. "No, sweetheart," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "You were the answer to mine. I was a lost man before I found you and your mama. You two saved me." Sarah joined them, placing one hand on Lily's shoulder, the other on Colt's. "We saved each other," she said. "That's what a family does." They held each other in a tight embrace, a circle of love in the heart of the wilderness. Outside, the well was covered in a thick blanket of snow, its season of lonely struggle over. It was no longer a place of desperation. It was a place of beginnings. A place where a broken man and a broken family had found each other and become whole. It just goes to show you that sometimes the most beautiful stories grow from the hardest ground. What started in darkness and fear ended here, in the light and warmth of a home filled with love. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like and subscribe, because there are always more stories waiting to be told.